Word. Hello, hello. Welcome back. Today we have a very, very special guest, Sara Powell, with us. And Sara is a rock star. Okay, I want to start off by saying Sara is a rock star. I met Sara when I was doing my executive MBA at IE Business School in Madrid, Spain. She was one of the mentors for a social impact venture challenge that we were part of. And right away, we got along super great. And I was really impressed with her career journey. So, welcome, Sara, to Bold Hearted.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, I kind of want to introduce you to the audience because I think all the stuff we've done is so great. So, Sara is the founder of Impactury. It's a company that provides career fulfillment coaching to women executives who are seeking more purpose and less stress at work. And I know we've all been there. Now, prior to Impactury, she worked as a COO of a digital consultancy and consultant for Accenture to serve mission-based organizations globally. She then went down the social impact path. She also co-founded a clean water social enterprise in Ethiopia. Over the past 6 years, Sara has guest lectured executive MBAs and undergrads at IE University in Spain on social entrepreneurship. And finally, Sara has a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering, an MBA from IE Business School, and is a certified mindset coach. Quite a mouthful, but that is how impressive Sara is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sarah, like I think one of the first things I think there are just so many synergies between you and me, which is one of the reasons I was always like wanted to talk to you, attracted to your journey. And me too. I also graduated in engineering and back in undergrads, did engineering for a few years, did consulting, and now I'm here doing a bunch of different things. So let me ask you a little bit about how you started off in consulting in Accenture. And I know that there's a lot of people in my circle who are in my network circle, listeners here off Bold Hearted, who are in traditional career paths. They're in either engineering, consulting, business, and sometimes they've also thought about like, should I leave this and do something else that I'm feeling a bit more jazzed up about, passionate about? How did you make that leap? Because we all know the golden handcuffs is real.
Yeah, I think that honestly, for everyone, there's sort of a level of pain that you get to where it's like, okay, the pain has become so great that now I have the courage to go out and do whatever that thing is to make that change. And for me, I mean, there's nothing wrong with corporate. Like there are entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. I always want to say that I think entrepreneurship gets very glamorized. It's definitely like one of the absolute, yeah, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. But I think for me, like when I was in corporate, originally I was working within our military defense practice. And that was for me not really feeling value aligned and inspiring. So I actually found within our nonprofit, or sorry, within Accenture, I worked with our nonprofit practice. And that was kind of my first taste of, oh, I can do these same apply these same business principles and things like that, but in a way that feels more meaningful and inspiring to me. And then I also did a lot of volunteering as well. So I would work with a lot of local nonprofits, but I would help them instead of, if it's building the houses or painting or pulling weeds or things like that, I would actually help them with their marketing strategy, their fundraising strategy, things like that. So I always love to combine business with making a difference. And so I always was getting creative with ways to do that, which is ultimately what led me to social entrepreneurship, which is exactly that. But another thing that I did while I was at Accenture was I took a leave of absence and I lived and worked in India for 3 months. And that was back in 2014. I was working for a social enterprise then that was working to curb human trafficking for at-risk women. And that completely changed my life. But there's so many different opportunities within corporate. I mean, people hate on corporate, and like I get I get that, but nothing is going to be perfect. And I think if you are more of a corporate person, just recognizing that and making the most of all of the opportunities that you have, because I mean, in corporate, you're not going to see the unlimited budgets practically that you see there, as in if you were having your own business or a smaller business. So you have so many connections, all of the employees. I mean, again, there's pros and cons. So many employees means you can be lost, just a cog in a giant machine. But I think any opportunity is what you make of it. So anyone who's feeling that, I think there are so many other ways that you can still feel inspired and connected to what you're doing. But if you are feeling that itch to, go out and do something, then I highly encourage you to do it. I mean, for me, you're asking like, what actually made me take the leap. And I think it was just, for me, there were goals that I set for myself that I'm very proud of, that I was able to achieve. But those were kind of like ticking the boxes of, okay, I've made this much money in my salary. Okay, I've made it to the C-suite. Check, like I've done these things. But I think there's something that lives within inside of us. There's a dream, something that's a seed that's in you that you're almost born with. And that thing will keep nagging at you and nagging at you until you
Exactly.
actually water the seeds so that they can bloom into a beautiful flower.
Oh
And
my God, yes.
for
I mean,
me,
all the things you said, there's so many points where I just want to like go like, yes, that part, that part, that part. So I'll just talk about the last one that you just mentioned, right? There's always a little seed in you. It's actually interesting you mentioned that because this applies to like so many parts of our lives too, right? But I was actually talking to a friend of mine like a year ago. She was a therapist, right? And we talked about like it's like an itch, right?
Mhm.
It's like an itch. And then say you have an itch on your shoulder, right? And you're just like in a meeting and it's just itching your shoulder and you're like, okay, I kind of want to scratch it. I'm not going to scratch it. It doesn't go away. It kind of just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're like, I really have to scratch it now, right? So it's sort of like what you just said, right? If you have a little bit of this desire or this need or this sort of like this empty or unfulfilled part of you, and you're like, okay, here it is. And then you kind of like just shove it aside and you're like, well, I got my day job to do. I got to do these things. I got all these things, right? And then you keep ignoring it. But then the voice, it's not tended to, right? It's an unmet need, right? Or an
Yeah.
unmet desire that just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Like you said, and at one point you got to be like, the pain or this unmet desire gets so big that you have to pay attention to it, that it just kind of takes over.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's always a theme. Like the older you get, the more experience you have, you can start to see these trends. And when I think back to even when I was in university, I was the president of the Society of Women Engineers. And that was for me the first time where I really was in a position to influence others and really help others and really make a difference. And I remember starting then, I was like, can I do this for my job? Like, could this be how
Yeah.
my profession? And then even when I was at Accenture, I was always doing different women's empowerment things. I was um, leading our International Women's Day event for hundreds of people. And I was always going back to these things, even, going to India and doing the sabbatical, that was helping women's social entrepreneurs. There's always been this theme throughout everything that I've done. And
Yeah.
finally, I got to a point where it was like, girl, like you've checked the boxes. Like, what if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. And so that for me was, okay, let's do this. And
Yeah.
I walked away from my C-suite job and
Yeah.
salary and all of those things.
You
But
believed in yourself. Like you could like, you know what? I have to follow this little unmet need in my heart, this little voice. And like you have enough belief in yourself, right? And it's pretty funny, whoever's listening and they kind of know me, they can sort of see like the similarities between me and Sarah. Sarah, when I was an undergrad, I literally founded the Women in Engineering Club in my university. So So depend like I guess that's how, and it's so funny that both me and Sarah, none of us are doing engineering anymore, but we're doing these other things. Hilarious. But there is definitely a theme. Um, so there's so many similarities between you and me, but one thing that you have done that is I haven't done that yet, and it's amazing. I'm not sure if I'll be ever be able to do that, but that the nonprofit that you founded in Ethiopia. Tell me more about that. How did that
Yeah.
happen? Like, that's amazing to me. Like I love social ventures. So please tell me more about that.
Yeah, so this was after, so when I did my MBA in Madrid, basically at that point, I had decided, okay, I'm leaving consulting. I know that I don't want to do this. I was living in Washington, D.C. I
Mhm.
sold all my things and then
Wow.
did the MBA. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna go back to the US. I'll live in New York. I wanted to go into impact investing, and once I got out of my day-to-day life and had real perspective, I was like, okay, no, I don't want to do that, but I wasn't sure what was next for me. And there was an opportunity with a professor during my MBA program to go to Ethiopia and basically try to figure out if we could build a sustainable social enterprise that was all around clean water access. And so a group of us went there, and I was leading the group, and we ultimately co-founded this clean water social enterprise in a rural part of southern Ethiopia. And this was absolutely incredible. Again, one of the most difficult things that I've done. It was really, really challenging. But today we've expanded to multiple locations, and we serve about 1,500 people per day clean water. So
That's
yeah.
amazing. That's amazing. That is, I love hearing that it's still ongoing and it's expanded, and you are still serving underserved communities in whichever country it is that you're operating in, whether it's Ethiopia or wherever it is, right? So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And now that you've also, so you were doing that, and now you live in Madrid. So how does it feel being someone from North America and a native English speaker living in a different part of the world, sort of living that life?
Yeah, I've made a lot of bold moves, I
Yes,
guess.
that's exactly why you're here. Love this. Yes.
Yeah, now that I'm, reviewing back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, moving here, thinking back on it was pretty crazy a little bit because I didn't know anyone in the country. And I at least knew Spanish growing up. I'm from South Florida, so I've been learning Spanish since I was like 5 years old. So at least I had that. But yeah, it was a completely new experience for me. But honestly, the reason that I even wanted to come to Spain in the first place was because a year prior I visited Spain on just a vacation, and the second that I landed, I was actually in Barcelona. I just felt a sense of home
Mhm.
wash over me in a
Mhm.
way that I had never really found in any other place, even my home where I'm from,
Wow. Yeah.
Florida. And it was something that I've always been looking for and seeking out, but never found. And I think the biggest thing is just that sense of belonging that I never really felt like I belonged in my hometown or kind of wherever I was going. And I think also just like a value alignment. Like I feel like in the US, things can be very focused on work, productivity nonstop. And for me, I want to enjoy life more. I want to be surrounded by people who are loving me and supporting me, and
Mhm.
just a slower pace of life. And Madrid gives me that. I think there's just such a sense of community here where you'll have people who are senior citizens, and you'll have little kids and teenagers and new parents and whatever, like every part of the spectrum. You have people who are all living together and enjoying life. And
Yeah.
I just like see
Yeah.
somebody on the street like every day. I'll just run into someone who
Yeah.
knows me.
Yeah.
You really feel that sense of belonging. And I didn't really feel that before
Yeah.
in the US, and I
Yeah.
love it.
I totally understand what you mean. Like, I remember like Spain and Greece too, like some of the, but let's just focus on Spain, right? Like people gather so much more than they do, and I think in US and Canada, right? People just there's always people out on like just sitting out and having a cup of coffee, like on the side of the pavements. Like there's always tables and people just gathering. And that sense of life is something that is not so prevalent on this side of the world, right? People are like, okay, I have to go to work, commute back home, and come home and get ready for the next day of work, right? It's a totally different lifestyle. So that balance is definitely missing. I hear you. So that's what attracted you to the Madrid, and then you sort of put your roots down. And you've been there for how long now?
Almost 7 years.
Almost seven
So
years.
it's a long time. I have no plans of leaving.
That's awesome. And so do you feel then that this sort of, I mean, I'm biased, but for everyone else listening, right? Do you think that this is a very enriching experience for somebody who's like, I've always lived in this part of the world and I want to go and live in another part? Do you think that that is something that everyone should experience?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's you have a perspective on life that you will never be able to have if you don't leave your country. I mean, even if it's not your country, like I remember even when I left and went to university, I was still in the same state, but it was night and day, my experience of, oh wow, people have different values. They do things differently. I mean, here it's even grocery shopping is different. There's so many things that for me it's just really added a layer of richness to my life that I wouldn't have had otherwise because I can take what I love from American culture and what I love from
Oh,
Spanish culture. I mean, I do the same thing even when I'm traveling. Like, I don't think you have to necessarily live somewhere. I mean, that that will add for sure if you can do that. But even if you can't, just really taking in the pieces of culture that you can from places that you visit just yeah it gives you a new perspective on things. It makes you, I think, makes you a lot more compassionate and understanding
absolutely.
of others and just more open that
More
it's
open.
not black and white. You can
Absolutely. More open, compassion. You have a more balanced viewpoint in the world and what's happening in the world, what's important in life, like all of that, right? And your viewpoint is not just because between US and Spain, right? But it's also you were lived in India for 3 months. That is a completely different culture as well from the US or Spain. Ethiopia, you went from not sure really how long, but a sizable amount of time. You founded a social enterprise there, right? So you've sort of like seen all the different like you've done the whole 360-degree circle, right? And you kind of see the different types of like lifestyles, values, cultures. And I kind of I think a few years ago I was saying like I absolutely recommend anybody who's lived in a developed nation, like who's grown up in Western world, right? To spend some time in a developing country. Like hands down, it is literally, I think it needs to be mandatory for in school for everybody, just so you have like perspective on the world, right? Like
oh yeah.
compassion, personality development, everything.
Yeah, I mean, living in India is, I think, what made which really contributed to the success of the business in Ethiopia because even though I didn't grow up in extreme poverty in a developing
Mhm.
economy, I still had enough experience living there and working with people who that was their reality that I was able to think about things that if you're just used to always having clean water available and consistent electricity and
Yeah.
healthcare and things
Yeah.
like that, um, you might not, or even just having a consistent income, those kinds of things. Having this awareness helped me to be more effective at creating a business that would actually work in a place that I'm not from. And also, I think consulting really helped me with that as well, because I go into a new business or this new environment that I'm not an expert in, but being able to assess things and be open to what are the different challenges and things like that and what are effective solutions we can come up with.
Yeah. So now that you've done all of that, and now you're currently you've started a coaching practice called Impactury, where you help executive women sort of escape the burnout or save themselves from the burnout that they have experienced over the last 10, 20 years and say hello to a life of a bit more balance, a bit less stress, correct? Yeah. So I've working in consulting, working in project management all my life. I have seen that. I have felt that. So many people have. So what led you to start that? Did you also see the need? Did you also see all the stressed out women in North America?
I mean, for me, basically going through all of those things in my career, I'm very much like doing the most all the time. And I really didn't have any boundaries with my own time and energy, and very much recovering perfectionist. And all of this resulted in me having so much stress that I basically was my health was completely deteriorating. And so I ended up just running my mental and physical health into the ground so far that I wasn't able to work for an entire year. I was struggling with really bad depression and anxiety. And I also had like problems with my thyroid and like all of these hormone imbalances. It was awful. It was one of like the darkest periods of my life. And all of this was really stemming from self-worth and limiting beliefs. The reason that I was pushing myself so far, and I think honestly one of the drivers for a lot of my success, was because I was getting my own self-worth. I was measuring that based on achievement and productivity.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's so common. And so basically when I wasn't able to work, it was like the ultimate dagger to someone who is, that's my lifeline. That is where my value comes from. And so I had to figure out another way. And the other
Mhm.
way was realizing my innate self-worth, that I don't actually need to do those things, that people love me with or without my job title, with or without any of these things. And that was a journey. It's a
Yeah.
lifelong journey. But I think to get myself out of that hole it was extra difficult for me because I was so ashamed of where I had ended up. Like, oh, how the mighty have fallen is what it felt like. And I'm not able to work, support myself. I don't have my health. Like, I don't have anything right now that would be any kind of like, quote unquote measure of success. And from that place is where, because of all of that shame, I wasn't able to ask for help. And so I suffered through this alone in isolation. And it was so horrible. And so I don't want anyone else to go through that. And I know that this affects so many of us. I mean, come on, who does not have, trouble with self-worth? It's,
Yeah.
so many of us struggle with that. And this was also just something that was subconscious. I'm a very confident person. I totally believe in my own ability to get something done, but it was more around, do I deserve this? Like, who am I to want this? Or no one's going to pay me for, these things. And basically once I was able to get on the other side of that through mindfulness, meditation, I'm like major advocate of that, but really understanding what my limiting beliefs were and releasing those and getting clear on where I want to go and understanding what those blocks were, releasing that so that I could move forward. And now it's like I can set boundaries. I love boundaries now. I value my time so much and my energy, and it's really was just a complete overhaul of everything in my life. It's like once I started changing the things on the inside, everything around me really started to change on the outside. And it was an accurate reflection of how I was feeling on the inside was what was on the outside. Whereas before it was everything on the outside looked picture perfect, but it was a completely different story on the inside. And so I now am so passionate about this and want to help other women to do the same and not have to go through this alone like I did. So yeah, so through the coaching program, then our retreats, we basically help women to just connect with their authentic selves and see how wonderful they actually are. Because I think a lot of times you can focus on what's wrong with me. I need to fix this. Again, that like perfection piece coming into play. It's like, okay, sure, no one's perfect, but look
Yeah.
how amazing you are. Look at all these incredible things that have made you
Yeah.
so successful. And so helping them see that and connect with their values
Yeah.
and, purpose that really inspires them. So
And
it's been the best, most rewarding work I've ever done.
that's amazing. And a few things that like, stood out to me because I've completely been there. Like I think many high achieving women have. They're like so many things, right? They're like a lot of our self-worth, our self-perception is tied to the job accolades and achievements and stuff, right? Like you talked about. But there's also a few like I think that also happens because a lot of the time and many people, not even high achieving people, but everybody, they have their identity tied to their job title, right? Like, so when that is not there, you're like, well, who am I? Right?
Mhm.
Like they forget there's other things. So like, I'm also a friend. I'm also a wife. I'm also a sister. I'm also, et cetera, right? They think I am this. And that's all lit. And when you take that away from me, who am I? And they feel lost. I mean, and I have been there. I mean, maybe a lot of people in your coaching program has been there too. You probably have been there. That is not something also I think we struggle with. And also the comparison, right? You're like, if I don't have this, suddenly like, oh my gosh, is everybody else succeeding and going where they're going and I'm just letting left behind, right? If you put a pause on it.
Yeah, I think
So many
the
things.
comparison that's yeah, comparison is totally natural thing that our brain does, but I think that's, about like being a trailblazer. It's just really listening to what do I want? What is my heart telling me? Like checking in with your
Yeah.
intuition because again, like you don't know that person's reality. Like especially I mean, when I was at my absolute worst, people were saying, "Wow, you're crushing it. Like you're doing so amazing." It's like, no, you
Right.
don't
You have no idea.
know
I'm
the person.
struggling to survive, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So you're comparing your reality to someone else's highlight reel, and that is not fair.
Boom. Boom. I love that. See, that's gonna be one of the snippets I'm gonna share on social media. Exactly. You're comparing your reality to someone's highlight reel. You don't see anything, any of the muck that's happening underneath the surface. But yeah, so that's exactly it. I totally agree with the fact that I think so many of us need to just check in with ourselves. Like, where are we at? Do we need to talk? I think you and I we even talked about once, some time back, that we should all be taking career sabbaticals
Oh
every
yeah.
so often. Huge fan, huge
I'm even
fan.
building in I'm even building in time because the way that like my energy works is I will get these huge bursts of energy, creative energy to put something out and then I need to chill. And what has happened in the past is that I try to continue pushing at that rate, which is completely unsustainable. And so now I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, but then I'm taking 2 weeks off. And I also scatter in, I mean, I have that flexibility because I have my own business, but I also just scatter in days that I take off. I make sure, even, for example, on Mondays, like I never schedule meetings on Mondays because those are my time. If I just want to do nothing that day because I need that time and space to recover from whatever or prepare for the week, or yeah, just to like
Carve out
carve
time.
out
Yeah,
for myself.
yeah, just exactly carve out time.
Yeah.
Great. So that was all of it. Such great learnings. I love it, and I'm sure listeners agree with it too. So I want to start wrapping this up, and I have two questions for you. First of all, what does bold-hearted mean to you?
I think being bold hearted is being courageous. I think it's having the courage to love yourself first. And then once you love yourself, I think you are unstoppable after that. And I think the other thing is being wise as well. So not just going after something, or yeah, just not just going after something, but being intentional with what you're doing. There's this Michael Jordan quote that I've been loving since I heard it. He says, I have something more important than courage. I have patience. I will become who I am. I love that quote because it's not just about having the courage to do something, but realizing if you're doing something really big, which is something a bold-hearted person is going to do, they have big, bold dreams, not just giving up after I did this for 6 months or I did this for a year, like having that vision and having the patience to become that version of you that you know you are. So I really love that. So yeah, I think someone who has the courage but also has the wisdom
Yeah,
to be intentional and be patient along the journey.
I love that. You owe yourself the patience, right? Otherwise, you're doing yourself a disservice. I love that. So good.
Yeah.
Um, and finally, Sarah, where can people find you? They are listening to you, they love you, they want to know more about you. Where can they find you on the internet?
Sure, they can go to impactury.com. So it's impactury.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Sara Powell.
I will link all of that on the in the show notes. So whoever wants to check out Sarah, make sure you check the description on the podcast episode description. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being here, for joining us. This was such a fun conversation, so inspiring to me, and I'm sure so inspiring to everyone else listening as well.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone.